Well, hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Vern's Misadventures. So in this one we're going to be continuing with our Compaq SLT 286 project. First thing we're going to do is come up with a way to run a setup program. We have to put it on a floppy disk because this particular unit uses a smaller connector that wouldn't necessarily connect to the GoTech. So rather than screw it up and all that, we're just going to use the floppy disks that we have, and we're just going to try and make a creative solution. I found the images for the genuine Compaq setup disks, and when trying to use them, it stated that I didn't have enough room on my floppy to, I guess, install it, which was odd. So I guess there was a installation disks to install the setup program on another disk. Whatever. Anyway, we didn't have room on our floppy to do all that. So what we had to do was we had to use a generic one called GSetup. So let's jump in there and I'll show you how I created a floppy disk with the GSetup on it, and we'll go from there. Alright, so I'm going to be using my Windows 98 machine, which was originally the Amithlon. I got a little frustrated with that project. I kept having hardware incompatibility issues, and so I just made a Windows 98 PC out of it. I'll make a video about that sometime, but we're going to use the floppy disk and the CD player in it for this project. Yeah. What we're going to do first here is we're going to go ahead and move the GSetup executable there. We're going to move that onto the CD player on my desktop so that we can burn it. And we'll just drag GSetup over there. There it is. Alright. So the next thing we got to do is go to where the Manage tab is, and we'll just go ahead and select to burn the image. Finish burning. Alright, well that's finished. We'll just get rid of all this. Alright, so we'll pop our new CD out of this machine and we'll put it in the Windows 98 machine. Now I've got a screen capture device that we're going to access through OBS here. Looks like I could have sized the screen a little better, but you know, what's done is done now. So we'll do the best we can with what we have here. Alright, so what I'm doing here is to make it simpler to use in DOS. Is I'm just going to copy these two files from the CD that I made over to the root of our C drive. So we'll just open up C and we will paste those two files. I'm doing a voiceover because there was a lot of racket going on between the fan on the Windows 98 and the other things going on at the house, so I just went ahead and just did a voiceover. It's better, it makes a better video. Alright, so I'm checking the properties, see how large the files are. Finally decided that I was just going to put the GSetup on the floppy disk drive. It's 1.44 megs, so both would have fit, but I don't remember what I was thinking at the time. I just decided to just put GSetup on there. So we're going to reboot into DOS because I had tried an earlier attempt to use Windows to just drop it on the floppy, and as soon as Windows touched the floppy disk, for some reason DOS couldn't use it anymore. So whatever. We're going to go in the root drive. The directory shows that our GSetup is there. So we're going to go to A. This is the floppy. Apparently I had made earlier attempts with this. So we're going to have to delete a couple files. So there was a little bit of a learning curve trying to remember how to delete files in DOS. So It's alright, I figured out how to do it finally. So we'll get rid of those two diag, which is the Compaq setup discs that we couldn't use. Yeah, we'll get rid of that QRST. Yeah, so here I'm deleting the mirror.file, or at least attempting to, but I'm not real sure what that does, but apparently you're not supposed to mess with it. So we'll have to leave that alone. We'll just go ahead and copy the G setup over next. There we go, copy G setup.exe. And we're just going to take it directly to A:, and that'll put it on the floppy. So, looking back at it here, I guess I had forgotten to delete the setup program. Right. So, we'll just delete setup. I made the decision to go ahead and delete it for some reason. So, we'll get rid of that. Alright, I think we're about ready here. So now we can eject this floppy from here, and we're ready to use it in the Compaq SLT 286. The disk we just made is not bootable, so we'll have to use the DOS disk. So that's that orange one there. Turn the machine on and boot into DOS. Yeah, see, we don't have the options set, so we get this error every time. So we're going to run G setup. Alrighty, time's fine, date's fine. We got to set up the floppy disk, so that'll be our next step. So we press 2, and then we select number 5, 1.44 meg. There, I don't have a second floppy, so onto the hard disk. So we press 4 to get to the hard disk 1. So if you notice, it says disk type. It's set on the hard drive that's in there. I just wanted to see if it worked or not. So we'd have to set it up. So I want to put type 2 like it said on the hard drive. So we're going to put type 2 here. Yeah, so I guess we're going to exit, and didn't even bother to fool with the memory this time around. Didn't notice it or something. So yeah, the memory settings were wrong, so we got this memory error. Shows right above there that our 640K were okay, so it's just a settings error. I was concerned that it wasn't going to get past this, because it does hang for quite a while. So I turned it off, I turned it back on again. Alright. So I decided I'd just wait it out and see what happens. Then we get the disk 0 error, so that would be our old hard drive, the old spinning hard drive that was in there. So that's dead. So it's starting MS-DOS on the floppy finally. And we are in. Alright, so we learned a couple things here. First of all, we learned that if we wait long enough, it will eventually boot the floppy. That's very good news. And even though G setup cannot set up our memory properly and all that, because it's just generic, right? We can use it to set our disk type. Now we're going to use that coming up here to change the hard drive to something that works. We also found out that our existing hard drive doesn't work, and we're going to use G setup to come up with a way to temporarily assign a value to our IDE to SD card, which is going to replace our hard drive. So this is good news, and we can use that going forward. So at this point, I made the decision to go ahead and do the hard drive, because it looks like we can make the disk setting anyway to maybe get the hard drive in. And my plan at this point was to go ahead and tear the computer down and get the IDE to SD adapter put in, at which point we would go ahead and run the actual Compaq setup, and if necessary we would set it up on the hard drive. So first thing we're going to do is remove the hard drive, which is in that perforated cover there. So kind of fast forward through that process as well. Alright, so you have to kind of move the ribbon cable, and then there's two hidden screws. I pointed that out here. So, and we'll get that little connector at some point here too for the power. That's what I'm doing right here. There we go. Pop that out of there. So lift it up to clear those long screws and got that out of there, huh? Alright, so the hard drive itself just kind of squeezes in with those little aluminum side fixtures. There's no hardware that holds it in there. It just kind of springs in there more or less. There we go. So that comes apart. We'll take those little aluminum side pieces off. Well, that'll be it for that hard drive. We're pretty much done with that since it doesn't work. Alright, so it's got this little bitty connector on it, and not real sure about the pinout on it, but I'm assuming it provides 5 volts, 12 volts, and a ground. So I think that's what I'm explaining here. So my plan was to basically remove that little connector and maybe use the little DuPont jumper wires. I have a bag full of those I bought from Amazon. So there's our IDE to SD card adapter there. That'd be replacing our hard drive. If we put it in the original place where the hard drive goes, we'll have no access to the SD card. So I'm kind of looking at my options here. If I use the original IDE cable for the hard drive, then it's going to have to go under that cover because it's very short. So if and then I'm going over the struggles for the power, right? So I'm thinking if I can use those DuPont jumper wires, well, they'll connect right in there. So here I'm figuring out that if I could just mount it in the battery bay, then basically could lift the keyboard and have access to the SD card. And so kind of settled on that idea. It seems like a pretty good plan. Be able to, you know, from the outside appearances it would look like it's completely original, which we didn't want to butcher it up and make it look like some kind of cobbled up mess. We wanted it to look nice like an original computer. We just wanted the extra functionality of the SD card device. So alright, so here I'm removing that little bitty connector. Yeah, so there's some of those aforementioned DuPont jumper wires. If you really jam them down in there, they feel like they made a connection. Alright, so the modem is in the way of getting to the IDE cable connector, and I'm going to need to change that cable. So out she goes. Now we can swap to a longer IDE cable. This just happened to be one I had in the house. I'm going to have to go to a longer one from the shed later. Now we can hook up the DuPont jumper wires, power it up for a test. Okay, lights up. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of stack the chassis on top of the case, hook up the monitor, so that we can test it. Well, it's hooked up. Let's see if it works. Okay, let's turn it on. We'll boot into DOS. We'll load the G setup disk to select a larger hard drive just for initial preparation. With the G setup, the biggest hard drive I was able to get was about 150 megabytes. So we're exiting and rebooting to DOS. Alrighty, tried to format the hard drive, but we got to run fdisk first, so we're doing that. Created a single DOS partition, and after the reboot we should be able to format it, because we sure couldn't do it before the reboot. So we'll format the hard drive with the system command. This will copy the command COM over to it. This will let us know if we can write to it. It looks like it worked. Alright, still won't boot to the hard drive, so we'll boot into the floppy. Okay, so I went ahead and copied all the other files over to C2 while I was at it, just to make sure we can copy. Try to use the copy command, but that failed. Give me an error, so I had to use xcopy. Yep. Alright, they're all copied over. So the IDE cable we put in sits up too high to reinstall the modem, so I have to get a longer cable anyway, so no big deal. Look at here. This one sits a lot lower, and it's long enough to fit to the battery compartment, so that's a win-win. Right, modem's back in, so we'll have one less error to deal with while we boot. Okay, so even though it won't boot the hard drive, we can read the hard drive, we can write the hard drive, so we can make use of that. So I turned off the computer and put the SD card in the PC to transfer some setup install files to it, the actual Compaq ones. When I went to run the utility that actually installs it to your computer, you're supposed to have some 720 megabyte disks to install it to, and all I had was 1.44 meg disks. So I had to do a little trickery. So this is me trying to do this, but as you can see, I'm going to get the message that you got to have the 720 megabyte disks. So here, let me show you what I did and how I overcame this. So it appears I failed to record this part on the video, so we'll just redo it real quick. It's easy enough to do. What I had done, because I was unable to use the utility to create a setup disk, and the reason why is because I didn't have any 720K floppy disks. All I had was the 1.44. So what we do to fix that is we can go to WinImage. If you open up WinImage, alright, here in my Compaq SLT 286 folder, I have diagnostic disks, and in there we have the one disk, the second disk, and then this one here is an actual image of a 720K. See 720K right here? Of a 720K diagnostic disk image. Now, the thing is, if you try to write a 720K image to a 1.44 meg floppy disk, you're going to have problems. In fact, you could ruin the disk doing that, which I had done using DD in Linux, but that's another story for another time. What we have to do is go File, Open. So we go to SLT, we go to Diagnostic Disks, and we'll open up this Compaq Portable Diagnostic Disk image, right? We'll open it. So once it's open, you can actually highlight anything you want out of here, like so. And then you can go to Image, and then you can extract right here, see? Or you could press Control X to extract. So you can extract the files from the image. And so we're going to go ahead and make a subfolder. Here we are. We're going to make a new folder here. Yep, and this will be called Setup 144. Okay, open. And so let's make sure we're actually putting it there. No. So we didn't seem to have. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, so Setup 144. And look in here, you got all the disks. So what I did to solve the problem here on the project you're watching here is I simply took these files and I put them in a folder. I think I called it a setup folder, right? I just took that whole folder, I dragged this whole folder right here onto my SD card, SD2IDE, the card in that, and the computer can read it, the computer can write to it, it just won't boot from it, right? So that makes it very useful for just running an application. So once you get all the guts from this disk into a folder, you can go to that directory in DOS and just run the executable. So then I went in and I ran setup.exe right here. Now another thing we could have done, which I didn't do, is we could have said we're going to go ahead and close this image. We can go to File and we can do a new image. I could have done a 1.44, right? Click OK. So then you go to Image. Now we're going to inject or insert, right? We'll go to this one. Open. Okay. I guess we got to select them all. No, we don't open. So you want to put 10 files into yes. So then we go like that, and then we just go click on the little disk here, and we save the image. We're going to change it to an IMG. We'll do it to an IMA. So we'll go through an IMA, and we can give it a name, and we will call it SLT 286. Right, so SLT 286 setup, and then we click save. So then we have an image, right? Now we could use other software like I'm about to show you here in this video, or we could use DD in Linux on the Windows 98 machine, and we could write that image to a 1.44 meg floppy. Now if you look here, the image we just created, this one right here, it's 1440 kilobytes, so 1.44 megs. And it's as simple as that to make images with WinImage. So very useful. You can download it for free. Let's get back to the project. So with the SD card back in the machine, we reboot. Still getting that memory error from the G setup settings. We're going to fix that right now. So we go into our Compaq setup folder, and then we just run ahead and run Compaq setup from the hard drive. It automatically corrected most of the goofy settings that G-Setup had made for us. I had to go down and manually set the numlock power on state to off. So with it on, if you don't understand that it changes some of your alphabet keys to numbers, you're going to have problems typing, and it's frustrating. So that all straightened out. We shut it back down so we could put the SD card back in the PC again to add the disk manager. We'll use raw write to create a floppy disk with the disk manager image on it. That's a pretty neat little program. It can write images to floppy disks. You just got to make sure you have the right size image for your floppies. You really don't want to write the wrong size image to a floppy. Alright, so now we can run Disk Manager from the new floppy disk we just created. This Disk Manager, I guess it updates the BIOS to recognize larger hard drives. Helps it work with the IDE to SD. It'll also work with IDE to CF. Yeah, it looks like that's done now. Okay, so we attempt to format the drive again, but didn't realize we really need to reboot after we changed BIOS settings. So we'll do a reboot, try that again. Alright, coming back up, look at here. Clean reboot. No errors. Just booted into DOS like it's supposed to do. Like a real computer. As you can see there, our SD card now reports as around 500 megabytes. That's not huge. It's not 16 gigs like the card we have in it is, but that's pretty good size for a DOS hard drive of this era, so it'll be fine. So once again, formatting the hard drive with the system and copying over all the rest of the DOS files, so we'll have a fully functional DOS system on the hard drive. Did you see that? It just booted into the hard drive. Oh yeah, just like a real computer. So we'll pop the SD card back in the PC and we'll go ahead and move a few more files over to it. All done. Let's boot the computer. Ah, that's so nice to see it just boot right in. So we have a working hard drive. Let's put the Compaq back together, at least mostly. So just kind of fold that IDE cable up and set the IDE to SD on the cable to keep it away from the aluminum for now. Probably in the next video we'll go through what I did to make a little more elegant solution to that situation. I could have left that hard drive cover out, but you know, it doesn't hurt anything to put it back in, and why scatter pieces to the wind when you don't need to? We can find it. We know where it is. It's in the computer. Find something else to put in that space, why we'll take it back out. It's no big deal. Alright, all tucked. Time to stick it in there. Oh, that miserable video cable. There's got to be a better way. There just has to be a better way. And I'll get that together here, and then we can push the chassis back way in. The rest of the way in. go. Y'all starting to see what I was thinking? It's like that space was made for it. As long as you don't need a battery. Run these screws in. We just about got this. Put the keyboard back. With the keyboard on top, you'd never have any clue there with there's any kind of modifications on it. It's pretty sweet. Let me just clean my fingerprints off the screen. Just a few more final touches, and it's going to be really sweet. But for tonight, I think we're done. And for this video, we're going to go ahead and call it off because it's getting a little long. So, yeah, we definitely have a hard drive now, and I want to thank you all for watching. We'll finish her up a little prettier, install Windows 3, and play some games in the next one probably. Make sure you subscribe so you won't miss it. Till the next one, y'all. Take care.